All right, folks. Moments ago, FOMC just released their minutes, and it was, by the way, the first for Kevin Warsh at the helm. Remember, the meeting was a humdinger. And with me at that time and back, Danielle DiMartino Booth, QI Research founder, CEO, and chief strategist. All right, so listen, I mean, we sat there in awe of that first meeting. So how did the minutes, how did the minutes juxtapose with that?
The minutes came across as regular. So Janet Yellen in 2008 advocated for massaging the minutes. This came out in FOMC transcripts. He didn't do that. He just let them fly as they were. He was just...
We don't have to wait 20 years to find out what really happened.
We do not,
okay.
No. And in fact, he's advocated for getting rid of the transcripts, which came about in 1996. I mean, he's advocating for getting rid of everything. Remember in Portugal last week, he was like, the dot plots are around for now.
Right.
Meaning, you know, come 2027, we might not even have a dot plot to ponder. So what would we do?
Well, and speaking of Portugal, he talked about his goal, the 2%. That's their goal, long-run objective. Right. They emphasize, right, the 2%. That's their goal, their target. It has been for a long time. And the street, I mean, the financial media sort of took that and ran with it. That again, he's hawkish, but I think they keep missing that he does want to change a lot of things, including how we measure inflation, right?
He does. He recognizes that there are alternative measures that aren't so lagged that you're like, when they come out, or you're like, okay, what were the imputations that went into this? What were the hedonic measurements that went into this? He actually wants to see data in real time, which is why his hair is still black. So, because he's young enough to appreciate that. And I think that he didn't announce any of the members of the task force. Of course, Mervyn King was a big one on communications, but he didn't announce any of the members of the 5 new task forces before the meeting, because I think he wanted to wait to get that press conference over with before saying we're bringing in outsiders. And that's a big deal, Charles.
Was there a sense in the minutes, though, that anybody was offended by this?
No.
A lot of folks who monitor the Fed circling the wagons. They said that he attacked the institution, that he's attacking his fellow colleagues by doing these task force. Well, he knows what he's trying to do, that he's trying to usurp maybe their authority, tradition. No one spoke up at the meeting?
Not according to the minutes.
Really?
According to the minutes, they were like, we agree that communications look, actions speak louder than words.
Right.
Charles, have you ever heard the sound of silence like we've heard since the Fed met?
Right.
It's not everybody trying to get their 3-minute spot on a different financial network. We've not seen this little Fed communication in years. So clearly he presented, a good argument, and the minutes actually said that. They were like members of the committee concurred. They agreed with Warsh that forward guidance needs to be revisited, as in bye-bye.
Right.
That communications need to be revisited. They're bringing in Mervyn King, the former head of the Bank of England, who does not advocate for forward guidance, who does advocate for reducing communications, which you and I both know they've been a huge source of distortion for markets for years.
Right.
But again, actions speak louder than words. We haven't heard Fed officials these last few weeks.
What about this? The few participants commented that there was a case for raising the target range. We know a lot of folks, speaking a lot, before that meeting, a lot of folks were out talking about, now they did make a huge shift with the economic projections.
They did.
I believe that they set themselves up because, if oil, we'll see how much it goes with this latest blip in Iran, but it was at one point, West Texas Intermediate, $68. That to me seems like they've set themselves up so positive surprises not necessarily, inflation going away, but because they set the bar so high, maybe some positive surprises. I
think that he is definitely setting us up. Look, if you look across Europe, we've gotten one downside surprise after another with inflation. So we get CPI next week. We could very well get a negative headline figure month over month because energy prices that were such a huge spiking influence have now come down that much more. So we're going to have to wait and see how the market might react to a negative number in front of a month over month CPI. And he did mention, the only thing he mentioned in Portugal about policy was that inflation expectations have come down. Even with this latest run-up in oil prices, we really haven't seen a big movement in inflation expectations going
Just
out.
Maybe a little nudge in that New York Fed thing, but again, a nudge, nothing shocking. I got to ask about this piece that Besson had in New York Times. Essentially, that America will set the economic tone for the world. Listen, we know that they have grant schemes, Bess and Warsh, both picked by President Trump for a reason. Not, you know, they meet at least whenever, I guess at least once a month.
Once a week.
Once a week, okay.
Once a week.
So they meet once a week. What's the grand scheme here? What's the grand scheme and what's holding it back right now?
I think that there is an opportunity because remember, Fed said that he was going to make sure that the Fed stayed independent, but that didn't mean that he wasn't interested in what the Treasury was doing going forward. So I think that there is an opportunity to collaborate more and let the Treasury be more active with U.S. Treasuries than the Fed has been, to back away from quantitative easing, to turn off the money printer, so to speak. And if that is the case, then the Fed does end up becoming more independent as a factor of time, and maybe Bessent ends up being more active. That wouldn't be such a bad thing either. But Charles, as we were saying before we came on the air, I think what's missing here, and what Bessent wants, what everybody wants, is for corporate America to engage. And I think for that to occur, we're going to have some clarity in terms of how do I operate my business going forward. And I think that would really, really benefit Bessent and Warsh, as opposed to the whipsawing that we've been seeing in international market. I mean, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning just checking to see what the South Korean market was doing. That's not normal. But it's because we're seeing such massive swings, and we need some clarity and calmness in corporate America, because it's not up to the public, despite what some of these elections have suggested with some of these socialists. It's not up to politicians to say what's happening, but it's corporate America.
And you see these socialists being elected, do you say, maybe I should do something different? Maybe I should bring on some onshoring, even if it means we lose a penny on earnings this year?
I hope so. I hope so, because a lot of the people out in Silicon Valley, they're the ones advocating, Charles, for socialism, for universal basic income. It would benefit them, right? I mean, they're talking about AI working to their benefit, but we don't want to become a country of robots and drones mentally. Not at all. I think you're right. A penny or two here from earnings, corporate America steps up, use AI to lift all of Americans. That's a heck of a lot better than paying people to not work, which is what some of these elections will end up doing. And that's not, I'm sorry, we just came through 250 years. We don't want our founding fathers to be spinning. That's not how we got here. That's not the American way.
Thank you so much.